Today we're going to talk about how to set the snare drum or your practice pad up. This is way more important than you might think. If the drum or the pad is not in the right spot, it makes it really difficult to play relaxed, which is what we're trying to do. So, let's start by making sure that the legs of your stand are the proper width apart. If it's too narrow, the drum or the pad can become wobbly when you're playing. And if it's too wide apart, then the whole thing might bottom out, which could be a very bad thing. The height of the stand should be determined by putting either the rim of the drum or the rim of your pad about at belt buckle level, right around here, okay? Once you have the legs spread wide enough apart, and you also have the drum at the proper playing height, level, not angled forward or backward, or side to side for that matter, we want to make sure that you're standing the correct distance away from it. So if we grip the stick about a third of the way up, and we'll get to the grip video pretty soon, if we grip it right about there, on both sticks, and then put both stick tips in the center of the drum head, we want to stand far enough back where our upper arms hang relaxed straight down our sides. We don't want to be either too forward, which puts our elbow way back like this, or too far back where we feel like we have to reach at the pad. So once we're in the right place, plant your feet shoulder width apart. Make sure you keep your knees comfortably bent. Don't lock your knees. We don't want anybody passing out. And then we're ready to play. This is your basic stand. This is for a snare drum, but a lot of practice pad stands look similar. So the basic parts are the legs, which are secured by this wing nut. Notice that this set of legs is not too low to the ground, causing this part to bottom out, and it's also not too narrow, which might cause it to wobble back and forth. This part of the stand is the part that determines the height of the drum or the pad. When you loosen this telescoping portion goes up or down to help you determine how high it needs to be. Make sure both this one and this one are tight after you've determined how high it needs to be and how wide apart you want the legs to be. The final portion of the stand is the basket, which also uses another wing nut on the back side here. This determines the tilt this way or this way, and it also can help determine the width of the basket here. What you want to do is make sure that you have your drum nice and level with the ground and the basket is wide enough to accept the drum. We don't want it clamped down on the drum, we also don't want it too wide apart. So once you've got all three portions of the stand, including the basket ready to go and the drum resting on it, let's talk about the snare drum. This is a basic snare drum, and a pretty beautiful one if I do say so myself. Your drums at your school or at your house might be different, but all snare drums share a lot of parts in common. We're going to talk about those. The most important part of the snare drum is the shell. Mine is made out of wood, but some are made out of aluminum, brass, steel, a ton of different types of wood as well. So that's the shell, okay? Drilled into the shell are these things. These are called lugs, and they house these little screws called tension rods. The tension rods go all the way around the drum head, and they hold this thing, called the hoop, down against the drum head. The drum head on top of the drum is called the batter head, and the drum head on the bottom of the snare drum is called the resonant head. Once you have all the tension rods and hoops and heads on both the top and bottom figured out, let's talk about the part that makes the snare sound. This is called the snare throw-off. This one is pretty special and specific. It has three different types of snares, but some only have one type of snare. That's okay. The main point is that this lever throws the snares on or off contact with the bottom head, which produces that snare sound. And then in conjunction with this, on the other side of the drum, you'll see something called the butt plate. That butt plate is adjustable, but it's where the snares terminate on the other end of the drum. Some don't always adjust, but that one does. So we've got the strainer, the butt plate, the head on the bottom, the head on the top. We've got the lugs, the tension rods, and the hoops, and then most importantly, the shell. So this is our basic drumstick, okay? The drumstick has a couple of different parts that we also need to talk about. The back end of the drumstick is called the butt of the stick. This part's called the shaft of the stick, and this part is called the shoulder. The shoulder has a taper, and the type of taper varies from stick to stick. If the taper is very long, it'll tend to be lighter at the front of the stick. But if the taper is very short, it'll tend to be heavier at the front of the stick. There are pros and cons to both of them, but you should just know anyway what that's all about. And then this is the tip of the stick. The tip of the stick has a bead on it. And there are a bunch of different types of beads that you can research on your own. So we've got tip, which has a bead on the end of the stick, the shoulder, which has a taper on it, and then you have the shaft of the stick, and then finally the butt of the stick. Your hand goes on this end, and the drum goes on this end.